Hello and welcome to This Is Not an Episode, a now weekly podcast where we talk about what's going on in the wide world of philosophy. Who are we? Well, I'm Jonathan Talent. I am a philosopher. And Andy, who are you?
I'm Andy Fisher and I'm a philosopher. Jonathan, what have you been up to then this week?
Well, lots going on this week, Andy, but some of the bits and pieces I've been looking at are some articles I've been writing with some co-authors, and a few of things that have been under review for a little bit, and we've had some comments back from the reviewers who like some bits, dislike others. I've been trying to put together the right responses, not just writing back to the reviewers and saying, "You're wrong, you're blathering idiots," and trying to be slightly more constructive than that, which sometimes goes better than others. But yeah, some progress being made.
Oh, lots of exciting and interesting things this week. A standout thing was I was internal chair for a PhD viva for a PhD student in Nottingham who'd got an interesting thesis on naive realism. And what was good about it was not just that she passed, and that was great, but I met an external there, Henry Taylor at Birmingham, and I looked him up beforehand on his web. Fascinating stuff. And one of the fascinating things was on robotics and cultural robotics. So I tracked down some things he'd written, and I've been reading about that. So I thought I'd just have a little chat about what that was. I was really, it's one of those things again, you think, of course. Yeah, it's one of those things that should have just dawned on me that if you're making robots and putting them in the world, if you've got a care robot who's looking after someone in a care home, or an entertainment robot or a waiter robot or whatever, then they're going to interact with people, and people aren't the same. They have different cultural things.
Yep, I'll give you that.
Yeah, they have different things like space, how close you can be to someone, or whether you interact with them when they, a waiter, for example, might have small talk when they're giving food out, or they may not, depending on whether you're Japanese or Italian. And I think what Henry writes about is an assumption of that there is one culture. It's sort of monolithic, and the problems associated with that. So the idea that you would look at Arab culture, I mean, that's an offensive term anyway in that context, but there's no such thing as German culture, British culture. There's different things in different contexts. And I think that's a really important lesson, because I think some of the cultural robotics is driven by that idea you can just find the five people do. But of course, that sort of bakes in bias, bakes in stereotypes, bakes in certain assumptions, etc. Sorry, when I'm saying that, I'm thinking of cooking robots, actually.
Okay. Interesting. So can I wonder whether there'll be people who are listening to this. Well, I wonder if anyone will be listening to this. But if they are, I wonder whether there's scope for a bit of pushback here, Andy. And I'll imagine someone who says something, who starts hearing that talk about cultural stereotypes and so on, and goes, "Now look, we've got a British culture, right? We don't need to talk about stereotypes or baking in bias, right? We've got a fantastic British culture. We understand what it is to be British. We understand what it means." This has been the idea of this being a negative thing has been blown out of all proportion, and actually there is a single unified notion of what it is to be British that gets blended and built out through our culture. So you're just wrong, Andy. What are you going to say?
First, it wasn't my thesis. Go and talk to Henry. But I think I just fundamentally disagree with that idea. I think there's not something that is the British culture. I think there are different ways of expressing different values that are actually universal. So I don't even know if there are British values. I'm a bit against that idea as well. This idea of schools have to talk about that. I mean, just think of entertainment, right? If you're doing an entertainment robot in London somewhere, or in Nottingham somewhere, and they're doing what would that look like? Well, it just depends, right? Who's your audience? Is it Farsi speaking? Is it Nigerian gospel choir? I don't know, whatever. It's going to just depend, and therefore your robot's going to just have to be sensitive to that. And not all robots are going to have this cultural stuff. I mean, if you're a Hoover robot, it doesn't really matter whether it says please or thank you. It just bumps into stuff. I mean, I think I think the really good thing about the work that Henry and others are doing is just prompting that question, really. And not. I actually, just before we came onto this, I saw an article on BBC about Tesla rolling out millions of these robots and putting more money into that. And well, if they're going to be in homes, if they're going to be in care homes, then that question needs to be asked, right? What sort of assumptions being made? And I think the idea of it just a neutral thing, well, neutrality's always got a position, right? Who's neutral? It's like the Queen's English. Well, where's the Queen's English? Yeah, right. Who are you actually representing in that? So I thought it was very interesting. Actually, it did strike me also. I wonder if you have things like cultural appropriation, or even if there's actually such thing as maybe developed a robot culture, right? So that would be interesting. Like independent, if you get autonomous culture robots who interact, and they've got the talking in certain languages that are not human, then perhaps it makes sense to talk about a sort of culture which is purely robotic. Anyway, that was me rambling, but I just thought it was a very interesting topic.
I think it is, and I think what's also would be really interesting to think about, and I don't know Henry's work on this, so forgive me if this is already out there and he has a position, and I have reading to do over the weekend, but I can well imagine that as soon as you start embedding robots in certain circumstances and not in others, you're going to wind up with two different subcultures, right? You're going to have the subculture that is robot acclimated and the subculture that is not robot acclimated, in the same way that you have particular cultures or subcultures where particular technologies are endorsed and made use of, and then other subcultures where they're not, right? And they just operate slightly differently. You wouldn't go to the culture that doesn't really use technology and just make particular assumptions that they'll have a degree of affinity with a new product and so on and so forth. Absolutely. So I mean, just based on what you're saying, even if you abstracted away all of the thoughts about British culture or other cultures around the globe, simply as soon as you start doing this, you're going to generate different subcultures, and then you're going to need to think about how you interact in those different subcultures.
Absolutely. I think what philosophers can do, and what they should be doing, and sociologists and anthropologists and all these sort of supposedly airy fairy subjects, will actually stop and say, don't just drive ahead in this space, right? Think about what's actually going to happen if you put these, and it's that richness and enriching of humans and human interactions, which the subjects that we're interested in can actually just really, really help. I mean, just to say, the Henry works with computer science Massimo Masuri, and I've watched an interview, and she's brilliant. She's a computer scientist with Henry. I just thought I'd say that it's not just Henry alone, but he works with computer scientists on this. So So I mean, perhaps I don't know if there's an entry in the Stanford Encyclopaedia on cultural robots, but I'm sure there's robotics. I'm sure there should be. But you've got some thoughts on the Stanford Encyclopaedia. Is that right?
Yeah, so for people who are listening who don't know, the Stanford Encyclopaedia of Philosophy is an online resource. It contains articles about pretty much the state of the art in huge numbers of areas of philosophy. And if you are remotely interested in philosophy and you don't know about the Stanford Encyclopaedia of Philosophy, go look it up. It is entirely free to access, and it contains articles, as I say, on a huge range of topics. And what got me thinking about the Stanford Encyclopaedia of Philosophy is that having just said what a brilliant resource it is, I have an article in there with a long-time collaborator, David Ingram. He and I have an article on presentism in there. And periodically, authors are invited to revise and refresh and update their articles to make sure that they do stay cutting edge and state of the art. And I think one of the things that I wanted to do, as well as calling out the excellence of the Stanford Encyclopaedia of Philosophy, apart from my entry, right? We'll gloss over that one for the time being.
Despite your entry,
just despite my hackneyed efforts, was to just talk to you a little bit about what you thought about the Stanford Encyclopaedia of Philosophy, whether you thought there were other interesting resources that people could be looking at, other things, if you thought there were problems with the Stanford Encyclopaedia of Philosophy, because I think it's brilliant in some ways. I think it has its limitations, but before I throw it under the bus, what do you reckon, Andy?
This is where I was just trying to wrap my brains for some critical insight, apart from just saying it's great, and it just is really, really, really good. It's good. It's good for lots of reasons. Not it goes beyond the typical canon, so it's got lots of really interesting. It's up to date, which as you know, because you've been asked to update it, up to date. But also one thing I use it for quite a lot is the reading list. So it has good curated reading list. So if you're interested in looking at more research on, say something about Mariology or whatever it is, then you can go to that and look at the bottom, and it'll give you the works that are key, and it'll give you some more information. So it really is just the go-to thing, I think. And it hasn't got that, because if a listener might think, oh, Stanford, so it's going to have a certain flavor to it, right? But actually it's not like that at all, not in my experience. It's just very comprehensive. It tells you how to cite the articles in it. It's just good. Yeah. So sorry, that's very unhelpful for a prolonged discussion, but I'm just saying it's great. Go and have a look if you're interested.
I completely endorse all of those sentiments. I think if there were two things about it that I'd just be, if I was going to have a complete wish list of things for it, just a couple of little things about it, which include things like the articles, because they're state of the art pieces, or they're about the state of the art in a particular topic. I don't always think that they're completely as accessible to a very generalist audience as perhaps you might wish. And I'm very happy to put my own piece with Dave Ingram in there under that heading as well. I don't think that, we haven't written for an audience who've never studied philosophy, who've never engaged with philosophical reasoning. There are there is an assumption in there, I think, of a degree of affinity with doing philosophy already. And I think that is the case for, I'm not going to say all of the articles because I haven't read all of them, but for a number of them, there is a degree of technical acumen you might already need to have in order to access them. I'm not sure if you think that's fair.
I think it's very fair, actually. And I was just thinking where you'd go for if you want a bit of easier access, and if you want very easy entry access, I guess things like Philosophy Bites and Warburton's work, and other sort of YouTube videos that you can get on it. Then, of course, there's the great book by Fisher and Talent on how to get philosophy students talking, which is, genuinely is good intro to lots and lots and lots and lots of things by just little thought experiments to get you thinking.
It is just over my shoulder. I can go and get a copy if you need me to.
But actually, I don't know where the next level is, because there's a few steps between that and the Stanford.
Yeah.
And there are some, good. I mean, the Royal Institute of Philosophy have some nice intro videos that are perhaps a good stepping stone as well. So if you go on YouTube and just type Royal Institute of Philosophy, and then you'll see these explaining animal ethics or explaining whatever. So that might be a good place to go. I don't know about you. I don't know where you'd go if someone said, where do I go for something a bit intermediate-y?
Oh no, that's a great question. I think absolutely right to call out Philosophy Bites as a great resource for people. The other place that you didn't mention that I sometimes really like is Philosophy Compass, for those sorts of pieces. Again, I think that the level there sometimes varies a little bit, sometimes relatively technical, sometimes not. But I think there isn't the same kind of systematic coverage, that systematic provision that the Stanford gives you at that level down. And again, what I'm saying is that this brilliant resource that is designed to do exactly what it doesn't do something other than it was designed to do, right? Which is no kind of criticism at all. But I was just conscious of the fact that having both of us said what a brilliant thing it is, we should probably just alert people to the fact that if they go and read a Stanford Encyclopedia article, having never looked at philosophy, and they didn't like it, I would still encourage them to consider looking at philosophical resources.
Yeah, and actually, linked to Henry, when I went to Henry Taylor's webpage, he does some work with Philosophy for Children, and he's got
fantastic.
series of videos on interviews and topics, and they've got lesson plans with them and everything like that. So that seems like a great free resource, and they're good introductions as well. So yeah.
Brilliant. Well, there we go. We've covered a whole bunch of things, and as I say, I hope that was of some interest to folks about what the sorts of things that they might go and look for. But you've actually been doing then also some other proper looking at things, Andy, rather than my little warble about the Stanford Encyclopaedia of Philosophy, which is making me feel like something of an imposter. So tell me about imposter syndrome.
Yes. So this is, I think this is a subject which is getting more talked about in universities, especially since I was an undergraduate many years ago. Imposter syndrome, and I think it's tough to talk about, in universities. And perhaps we can generally talk about that in a minute. But the article piece I was reading was that the claim that we should think of imposter syndrome, which is generally, very broadly speaking, the idea that you're in a position, maybe a lecturer, or you're in a student, and you think you've done it, you've conned the system, and you've got there not by your own merits but by some kind of fluke. Or so when you're in a meeting thinking, I'm really dumb, why am I in this meeting, everyone knows what's going on, I don't. That's what essentially that's what imposter syndrome's like. And this article says, well, what a really useful way of thinking about imposter syndrome is in the same sense as conspiracy theory. So it's conspiracy theory about yourself. Now,
nice.
that is, I thought it was a nice thing, and that's good, because it explains why a lot of the strategies that people say imposter syndrome don't actually help counteract it. So, as you know, one of the problems with conspiracy theorists, if you talk to them, is if you say to them, they say to you, look, there's chemtrails, and you say, well, look, here's 3 articles and a pilot and whatever to show that probably planes aren't doing what you think they're doing. They're going to say, you're in the deep state, probably in that voice as well, I would have thought. But yeah, they're going to say, well, that's just evidence generated to propagate that idea, so you don't learn it. So everything's interpreted within that lens. So there's no way of falsifying it. And the thought is, well, if imposter syndrome is like that about yourself, then obviously any strategy is going to be really hard to, is going to be hard to be effective in that context. So if you say, I'm just looking at reminding myself, if you look at the example, for example, if you say to someone, look at what you've accomplished so far, right? So one way, if someone says, I shouldn't be at university, they must have accidentally accepted me through UCAS because of a fluke. And you say, look, but you did so well in your A levels, you did that. Look at, and they'll just say, well, it's been lots of flukes, right?
Yeah.
So it's hard to see that. And what this article does is it mentions 1 or 2 ways where think of it in this way explains why certain strategies won't work. But also it ends on one, I think, quite powerful strategy. And a strategy I think helps me actually, which is you say, well, if you say that I'm not good enough, that's actually a bit of arrogance wrapped in that, because what you're saying is the people around you aren't smart enough to make those judgments. So it's like a moral twist on it. So you're undermining their judgment and their abilities to make good assessments. So I thought that was a really good, nice way of looking at it. I mean, what do you think about this topic? And I mean, have you done any work on it? Have you thought about it at all?
So I'll talk about that in a second. As soon as we started and you were talking about, you gave that general characterization of imposter syndrome, I was absolutely back at my first day as an academic. So before I came to Nottingham, I had a couple of years at the University of Leeds as a temporary lecturer there. And I turned up in the school office, as it was then, on the first day. And there was a queue of students up to the desk to go and see people. And of course, there was a bit of space, so I wandered to the side. And the the school secretary administrator then fingered up to me and just said, no, there's a queue. And so, of course, I was like, right, fine, I will. First day in the job as never been there before. I was having exactly that feeling of, I don't deserve to be here.
Yeah.
I have fluked my way into this.
Yeah.
And then, of course, going to the back of this queue and being like, well, you're a student, right? And that was her view, right? Because when I got to the front, I said, hi, I'm Jonathan Talent. I think you're expecting me. She said, oh my God, I thought you were a student, right? I'm so sorry. I am so sorry, because I was like, it's not a problem. And bless her, it wasn't a problem. I didn't think she'd done anything wrong. The problem was mine, in that I was now going, oh God, I really don't deserve to be here. Which was kind of interesting. Yeah.
Well, I think academia, it makes it it's a really good breeding ground for imposter syndrome, because we never talk about failure, we never talk about struggling. I don't mean struggling, oh, woe is me. I just mean, for example, you started by saying you got some revise and things on your paper. And I think there's an assumption that the professors and stuff, they write a paper in a few weeks, send it off, and then it gets accepted. And after that gets perpetuated. And I'm sure these professors, she got a first and she did all these things and, whatever. Well, actually, if you talk to a lot of academics, it's just a struggle. And, you get rejections, lots of papers. You'll sit in talks where I sit in a lot of talks, I have no idea what they're talking about. I have to look up some of the words in the talks, like, what does that mean? Right? But because there's often that perpetuation, especially in old style philosophy, where any weakness was pounced on. And then we just create this breeding ground for that sort of approach. I don't know if that's fair. I don't know if that's just me, John.
No, I don't think it's you at all. I remember when I was a graduate student reading an article, Philosophy as a Blood Sport. I don't know if it's still online, and it painted a very particular picture of lots of philosophy seminars and presentations as being really hyper combative, and I really think that has changed over the last 25, 30 years. I don't think it's anything like the way that it was. But that doesn't mean I haven't sat in some talks where people have engaged in that kind of way. And we're not always, as academic philosophers, the most sympathetic of audiences. We don't look for the charitable reconstruction. We look for the uncharitable deconstruction of what someone has said. And I go and listen to talks in other subjects, and it doesn't always go like that. The culture is very, very different there. And I'm not always sure why we have continued with that set of norms as a discipline, right? I don't mean at all to talk about philosophy at Nottingham, which I think is very friendly and very open. But that general kind of a vibe where we're looking for, as you say, looking for weakness really does help with that sense of having a bit of an imposter syndrome. I guess one of the things that I wasn't sure about, Andy, and maybe we don't know the answer, but I'll ask you anyway because I don't know the answer. Is there a difference between actual imposter syndrome as a thing and then feeling like a bit of an imposter? Because I can well imagine that there's that kind of shorthand mode of expression which says, oh, suffering from imposter syndrome. Well, actually what you mean is you're just feeling like things aren't quite there.
That's, I mean, so the answer is I feel a bit of an imposter because I don't know the answer to this. If I was to guess, if you were to push me, I'd say it's about prolonged significant effect in your life in different contexts. You're right. It's a bit like the word depression is kicked around in common parlance. Right? Oh, I'm a bit depressed. Well, you're not. Really.
You're not.
And people saying, "Oh, I feel a bit of imposter." Maybe, but I don't think it's imposter syndrome. Imposter syndrome is where you struggle to function to what you should be functioning, in terms of your abilities, etc., because of this self-sabotage, essentially. But again, it'd be good to look it up. I don't know, but that's what I'd start as.
That would be my guess as well. And one of my reasons for asking it was because I am someone who very frequently feels like an imposter in various different circumstances. I'm very familiar with that kind of a feeling, whether that's in an academic philosophy setting or if I'm out talking to partners in some of the civic and commercial work that we do, I regularly feel like, oh, everyone knows more than me. I'm just here trying to do whatever. But I don't think, like you, I was thinking, there has to be some element of self-sabotage, of real significant undermining for it to be in that kind of a headspace. And I don't think that that's me. I try and cling on and just hold on long enough to try and get myself into a position where I can try and contribute anyway.
Yeah, and you're right, and I don't. It's something I'm going to go and have a look at actually, because I don't know where the cutoff is. I guess that might be one way of thinking about it. One of my favorite. This shows, I think, my mindset. One of my favorite things we do in philosophy is when we have someone give a job talk. Right, so I'll let me explain this side of it. I think you might like it as well. So the idea is people apply. Just to give people context, we had a job applied and there was about 350 people apply. So we sort it out, sift it out for lots of different reasons, and then 5 or 6 people come and give a job talk. Now the bit that's cool is we have to, and they give a talk to the audience, which is just us academics. The cool thing is the academics have to pretend to be second years. Now that's incredibly liberating, because you can ask questions like, I didn't really understand what that meant. And that's actually what you think. But now you're given license to ask questions in that way. So that's a really fun thing. And I think every time I do that, I think, actually, I wished it was like that. And I think it probably is, but I don't feel it is like that.
No, I know what you mean. My response to the job talk thing was just, I think, twofold. First, I hate job talks. Right? I just can't. Oh, anyway. But I do remember having been in a job talk at some point, and I will say I've been on panels at other institutions, so I'm not revealing where this happened. Where someone who was supposed to be being a second year philosophy student asked one of the most technical and loaded questions of a job applicant I've ever heard, let alone not just in like a job talk, but in any philosophy seminar presentation. And you do have that little bit of a dying inside moment for the candidate who's just been presented with this, and you think, oh.
Yeah. And it also, mate, when that happens, and it's a bit like when you get professors, academics, or whatever, having a go at students for not knowing things, and you think, what that really reveals to me is a very big insecurity in you. What are you trying to do, and why are you trying to do it, and what are you trying to perpetuate? How do you want to be seen, and why do you want to be seen like that? So I think that all ties into that topic, and I guess I think just knowing. So when I talk to my students in day one in the lecture, I say to them, hey, I went to one university and I changed another university, and I failed some of my essays, and I'm dyslexic, so I had a reading age of 9 at university, and all this stuff. And then invariably students come to me after and go, oh, thank you so much. I feel like that's a weight off my shoulders. I just think we need to be more open with that, not as a sort of self-serving, oh, where is me, but in a sort of just life. We're not perfect in any sense.
I am certainly very far from being perfect, so I will agree with your sentiment. Andy, we've been talking a bit about I know we started with the conspiracy and imposter syndrome stuff, and we've sort of shifted on a little bit to talking about general things about philosophy and education and so on. Do you think maybe for the next episode we should have a bit of a chat about philosophy in the state of higher education?
Oh yeah, that'd be really good. Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's ongoing debates, as you know, about what should be core, whether we should have core, those sort of questions, what sort of subjects, how broad should we be, and all that. Yeah, that would be really interesting, definitely. Yeah.
Brilliant. Well, in which case we shall go away and start doing our reading for that, because that's going to take us until next week. Well, it certainly will be for me. In the meantime, we'll close it there. We'll be keeping an eye on what's going on in the world of philosophy, and we'll be back next time, everyone, to talk to you all about those incredibly insightful reflections on philosophy and education and how all of that dovetails together. Until next time, it's goodbye from me.
And goodbye from me.
Thanks very much, Andy. Goodbye.
Bye.